Commanders, this is Brightwood from Oracle Station. Welcome to the crew analysis for Dr. TAna in Star Trek Fleet Command. Some of you may have picked up Dr. TAna when she was released into Star Trek Fleet Command during the October 2023 arc Lower Decks 2, Part 2. Dr. TAna is a Chief Medical Officer in the USS Cerritos in Star Trek Lower Decks. With her being added to Star Trek Fleet Command, they introduced the second Lower Deck crew with PvP to the mix of PvE crew already available. So let's get into Dr. TAna in Star Trek Fleet Command and see how we can use her and if she is worth the chase for those who have not yet acquired her. Dr. TAna is an epic officer. Her division is Science, and her faction is Federation. She is a member of the Lower Decks group, so she will provide synergy to any officer in that group with a captain's ability. TAna's abilities are PvP centered, continuing the Lower Decks 2 arc's introduction of crew from Lower Decks series with PvP abilities. Dr. TAna's captain's maneuver is Chief Medical Officer. Being the Chief Medical Officer, TAna has no captain's maneuver. Equipping TAna as the captain of the ship provides no benefit. And since she is this Chief Medical Officer, this seems to fit that she would be more of a supporting officer versus commanding. TAna does have an officer ability, and it's called Make a Mess. On round start, TAna has a 40% chance to apply a random state to the enemy player's ship for 3 rounds. This goes up to an impressive 100% chance at Commander. The random states that TAna will activate are either Morale, Burning, or Hull Breach. The application of the random status is nice when it comes to supporting Captain Carol Freeman. The big problem here is that you have no control over the state that TAna applies. This means that there's a 1/3 chance that you'll actually are going to get the state that you want. This is very nice in support of Freeman, but it's not so nice in support of your ship. Some commanders may find value in using Dr. TAna, but commanders who actually have maxed out their state officers will not find her to be that beneficial. The low synergy boost that she's going to give Freeman does not offset the lack of control that you have over the state that's being applied against your opponent or being added to you. And for those of you that are actually using her on the bridge next to Freeman and want to go find out what state she actually applied, you're not going to find it in the battle log. This has been reported to Scopely, but at the time of making this video, if you look in the battle log, you'll see Dr. TAna activate and the state is being applied, but there's no indicator of which of the 3 states she did apply. TAna's below the deck ability is called Bedside Manner. And on round start against players, Dr. TAna increases your isolytic defense by 50% for 1 round. And this is going to go up to 250% at Commander. This is where it appears that TAna is going to benefit commanders the most. 50% isolytic defense is a great start for a first tier officer. But the 250% at max tier is going to be extremely beneficial in PvP combat. I welcome you to share what you think about Dr. TAna's officer and below the deck abilities with us in Discord or in the comments below. It would be nice to know how you're using her, what benefits you're finding from her, and how you're benefiting the most from Dr. TAna. Dr. TAna's away team traits that we will use in ATAs or away team assignments are Doctor, Perceptive, and Fluffy. These all seem to be fitting traits for Dr. TAna based on what we know of her character in Lower Deck series. I can't find any fault in the choices of these 3 away team traits. It's also nice to see another officer given the fluffy trait. It's about time that 10 of 11 got some company with the fluffy trait in the game. If you do a lot of PvP in the game, I don't really see you wanting to send TAna away on ATAs. Her below the deck ability alone is a great reason to keep her on hand, and again, for some commanders, they may find benefit in her officer's ability as well. But still, let's take a look at the ATAs. We might find that she could be a valuable ATA officer and worthy of our trait XP. This is a high-level review of ATAs. To really understand the value of Dr. TAna for your ATA needs, you will want to review the ATAs she's eligible for and determine their value to you. You can do this with the amazing officer tool put together by Stewie, Doo, and Lowe. The link to the tool is in the Oracle Station Discord. So let's take a look at the ATAs we can use Dr. TAna on. For her Doctor trait, there are 3 ATAs, and all of these ATAs will adjust to your operations level at some point. The first is emergency evacuation, then field operatives, and finally rescue attempt. TAna joins a list of several other officers with the Doctor trait. A couple of them are more likely officers you will want to use on ATAs that require the Doctor trait. But let's take a look at her other traits before we pass judgment on spending trait XP on Dr. TAna's traits. Next is perceptive. There are 2 perceptive traits. These are double agent interrogation and forensic investigation. With TAna, our long list of officers with the perceptive trait gets a little longer. The agent interrogation actually gives you premium recruit tokens, but I'm not too excited about this away team mission. I don't feel the rewards are worth the time the officers are away, so I don't run these at all. Forensic investigation, however, I will run these with just enough officers to get them to pass. Again, not super excited about that ATA, but you do need the service awards and the merits to be able to do more ATAs and other stuff in the game. Again, neither of these ATAs are going to give us a reason to want to invest your trait XP into Dr. TAna unless these rewards are valuable to you. And her final trait is fluffy. There is one ATA for the fluffy trait, and this is collective bargaining. TAna is the second officer to get the fluffy trait that will work on collective bargaining, but you're not going to want to run her on collective bargaining because of this trait alone, especially if you have 10 of 11. The reason for this is that 10 of 11 is actually triple traded on the collective bargaining, and one of those traits obviously is the fluffy trait. So you're going to want to focus your trait XP on 10 of 11 for this particular ATA and not Dr. TAna. TAna is only going to be able to run on 6 ATAs, and from the looks of it, you're not going to want to run her on any of them because you actually have better options, or the ATAs really aren't worth investing the XP into them. This is okay. That means Dr. TAna is going to be available to you to use in your PvP crew builds, and she will be available whenever you need her. Oracle Station will rate Dr. TAna for use on ATAs as very low interest. Again, you might find value in using her in your ATAs, but the only ATA that I really get excited out of this list is the collective bargaining. And then honestly, I have better crew to run on collective bargaining that will guarantee me a higher critical rate. That being said, you can actually put 3 officers different officers in the seats of your ATA, and you can actually get 3 of these traits filled, finally using TAna instead of 10 of 11 on collective bargaining. Now that we've taken a look at TAna's setup, what are the advantages and disadvantages of her build that we can pick out right away? Well, let's start with the advantages. Both of her abilities activate on round start. Her officer ability lasts for 3 rounds. She is the only officer right now that is from the Below the Decks group that will provide PvP synergy to Freeman, who is also part of that group. At Ensign, her isolated defense is decent at 50%, but at Commander, this goes to an impressive 250%. She has the Fluffy trait and is the second officer added to the game with that trait at this time. Disadvantages of Dr. TAna is she's dedicated to PvP only, which really makes her limited use for some commanders. We have no control over the state that she's actually going to activate when in combat. So putting her on a specific ship isn't going to improve the chances of, for example, on an interceptor, us getting the hull breach state. The synergy that she provides Freeman is not enough to be beneficial to really put her next to Freeman on the bridge. And that there's only really one ATA that appears to be of any great value that she could be used on. So far it looks like her advantages and disadvantages kind of balance themselves out. There's a little bit of an edge on the advantages. Ultimately, though, her performance is really going to determine how good an officer Dr. TAna really is. Looking at Dr. TAna's setup, she's definitely going to be more valuable for commanders who are interested in PvP. Actually, she's only valuable to commanders who are interested in PvP. And as she gets higher up in level, her officer abilities percent chance can get up to 100%, which is pretty nice. But the big problem there is that you're going to have absolutely no control over which state she's actually going to activate. And if you're watching your battle logs, you'll notice that when she does activate, it's not going to indicate what state she actually activated. Scopely may update this to show the state in the future when she does activate. But right now, she doesn't show the state that she activates within the battle log. Because of the low synergy and this lack of dependability on the state that she is going to produce, I really don't find a lot of value in her officer's ability. But what I do see potential in is her Below the Decks ability. Reducing the amount of isolated damage is actually really nice, and it's starting at 50% is decent. And as you level her up, that's going to go all the way up to 250% reduction of isolated damage. And this is going to be super helpful in PvP combat. With her weak ATA performance, the unpredictability of her officer ability, I really think the value of Dr. TAna is going to be Below the Decks. Leveraging that isolated defense is going to buy you more time in combat to secure the win. First, a quick note before we get into how we're going to use Dr. TAna in our crew setups. Not every commander is going to get the same results that you may see in the examples that I provide. Remember, there are a lot of factors that come into play for combat. A lot of this is you and your opponent's research, artifacts, ship level, crew level, and even ops level. There can even be a significant difference in combat results based upon who actually initiated the attack last. So, these are baseline configurations that you can use, but they may not be your final crew configuration. You are going to have to take the information we provide and then leverage your battle logs and understanding of your opponent to optimize your configurations for best results. Putting TAna in our crew is going to be fairly straightforward since she is locked down to PvP, and her use is also very limited, or should I say simplified, because of her abilities. Normally I would break down the use of an officer by categories, but with TAna's build it's actually going to be a lot easier for us to talk about how we can crew her. Instead of breaking down by PvP activities, we're going to look at Dr. TAna by on the bridge and below the deck. So first, let's take a look at how we're going to use Dr. TAna on the bridge. We're going to start here because, again, I think it's very straightforward and simple. We're only going to probably want to use Dr. TAna on the bridge for two basic reasons. The first reason we might want to use TAna on the bridge is she's really going to only be the officer that's going to actually apply any state. And we need that state to leverage the activation of Carol Freeman's officer ability. The second and probably most likely reason that we're going to want to use TAna on the bridge next to Carol Freeman is because our other state officers are actually tied up in other crew builds. Again, I don't think relying on Dr. TAna to activate a state for us is really going to be an optimal use for her, because we don't have control over the condition or state that she's going to actually activate for us, and it's going to be more beneficial to use those more reliable officers that will generate the exact state we need for the crew and ship that we're actually running. That said, some commanders might not have any other choice and will need to use her on the bridge to actually trigger Carol Freeman's officer ability. With Freeman in the captain's chair, we will put TAna in the side seat next to her, along with Honor Guard Worf in the opposite side. With this build, we've modified the similar build where we would have had Lorca instead of TAna in the side seat, or one of the other state generating officers. TAna is going to generate any of these states that Freeman needs for her officer's ability to activate, and you will get the benefits of that state. Just remember that not all states are equal. So if you can run any of the other state generating officers like Nero, Lorca, either of the Kirks, or Giorgio, you're going to be better off using them over TAna because you're actually controlling the state that you're activating. Even more so if their percent chance of activating the state is actually higher than TAna's chance to activate. Now let's take a look at why TAna is going to shine below the deck. First, there really isn't a lot involved in putting an officer below the deck, as long as you're getting the officer bonus that you need to make your ship efficient in PvP. Keep in mind, some of the below the deck abilities actually can be worth a drop in your officer trait bonus. So keep this in mind when you're crewing below the deck. Here are a few things you want to consider when putting TAna below the deck in your PvP crew builds. How many slots do you have open below the deck? Are there any below the deck abilities that will synergize with your ship to generate increased damage? How close can you get to your max crew bonus using TAna below the deck instead of another officer? And are there below the deck officers that are going to synergize with TAna? In crewing your ship to use TAna, it's really going to depend on if you're setting up one ship or more than one ship for PvP as to what you're going to complement with TAna below the deck. But as you can see here, I've paired up TAna and Ransom because on this interceptor, the two of them are going to increase my isolated defense against players significantly. Once we've placed all of our PvP officers below the deck that we're going to use, let's finish filling out the rest of the seats with any officers that are going to either boost the stats necessary for any of the officers that we've crewed, or to maximize our crew bonus. During the arc, you could obtain Dr. TAna's shards through the events or packs in the store, and this would actually allow you to unlock TAna during the arc, depending on your investment. After the arc, they have even ran Dr. TAna in additional events and in the XSLB. So expect to see her pop up in more events or in packs in the game's store. It hasn't been made known where Dr. TAna will be added to the game's sourcing. She could be added to the Cerritos refinery, or she could just remain a pay-to-progress officer for now. She could show up in the Incursion store, one of the locations available for obtaining strike team officers at a slow progression, or we may even see her show up with some of the PvP officers in the G5 Armada rewards chest. So if you're interested in Dr. TAna, keep your eyes open in all of these locations for her shards to show up. In conclusion, I'm not disappointed in Dr. TAna's crew configuration, although I can't say that I'm excited about it either. I still think there are some things that Scopely could have done to make her just a little bit better. For example, giving us a trigger mechanism to be able to reliably activate a specific state. This would make TAna's officer ability valuable and add a little bit of skill or ingenuity in putting her on a ship. So now that we've gone over TAna completely, let's go back and reevaluate her advantages and disadvantages, and then we'll give a summary on how valuable we feel that TAna is going to be in game. Dr. TAna's advantages are, again, both her abilities activate on round start. Her officer abilities last for 3 rounds. She is the only officer that is part of the Below the Decks group that will provide PvP synergy to Freeman at this time. Her Below the Deck ability can stack with other similar Below the Deck officers. This is something new that we discovered while we were evaluating her build. At Ensign, her isolytic defense is decent, and at Commander, it actually is almost impressive. And she has the fluffy state. Dr. TAna's disadvantages are she's PvP dedicated, making her very niche in how we can use her. We have no control over the state that she will actually activate when we use her in the officer seat. And then the synergy that she provides Freeman when she's in the officer seat is really not enough to make it beneficial in putting her in the officer seat. And she can only really benefit us in a single ATA. TAna's advantages seem to have started to outweigh her disadvantages. I'm still not that excited about her officer's ability, although it will work for you in a pinch. But I really do like the ability to stack her below the deck with other like officers to really boost your isolytic defense. And again, I really think this is where TAna fits best with our gameplay. Overall, Oracle Station is going to rate Dr. TAna as nice to have for PvP activities specifically. With the current direction of the game and PvP combat, if you want to succeed in PvP in the game, she is going to be beneficial to you in mitigating our isolytic damage. Check out our website for more videos. And join us in Discord using the link in the video description to continue the discussion and get access to more resources. We hope you found the video informative and helpful. If so, please give us a thumbs up and share. We look forward to your comments and suggestions. Live long and prosper, Commander. This is Brightwood from Oracle Station, signing off.